I tell this to a lot of people. If I wanted to hire people that just followed me around like lemmings, I wouldn't have hired this staff. I would have hired lemmings, I guess. But I wanted a staff that pushes each other, that pushes me, that can break down barriers in each of our lanes. Certainly, we're going to disagree on some stuff, and that's normal and good, and that's for me to help lead us through. But I really love the fact that we have an experienced group. We have a lot of work to do to get Michigan to where I know Michigan can be, and it's going to take people like that to push out those barriers versus someone that's just following me around. We're not going to get it done if that's the case.
This is the Leave It Better podcast, powered by the Side Out Foundation. Here's your host, Hall of Fame coach, Janice Kruger.
Welcome, listeners, to the Leave It Better podcast. I'm your host, Janice Kruger. Today, I will be talking with Erin Virtue. Erin was a part of the first Olympic gold medal for the women's national team that took place in 2021 in Japan. She's also the head volleyball coach at the University of Michigan. In this conversation, we talk about those experiences plus how the training environments affect athletes, how her family influenced Erin becoming Erin, and lastly, we discuss her thoughts on optimism. Now let's get this party started. The women's national team assistant coach position that you took and have been in now for several years. And you got one gold medal associated with that, and other tournament wins along the way within all of those things. And you get to work with a very famous, powerful volleyball head coach in Karch Karai. I'm jealous of you every day. I see you there. Can you tell me what that's like and how that came about? I believe there was some connection early on with you maybe pulling up from a job you had and heading to Colorado and becoming deeply involved in the development of the performance program for USA.
Yeah, so thank you first for having me on. It's a pleasure to have some time to talk to you. And I have a very unique position that really sits in a couple different camps. And this is now my 8th year of really working 2 jobs. And so I am busy, like you said, but super honored to be part of, like you said, with Karch and his staff. After the Rio Olympics in 2016, which is normal after a quad or after an Olympic Games for the national team staff, it really turns over. And after 2016, Karch was left looking to fill his whole staff. So he lost an athletic trainer, and then his assistant coaches moved on to other ventures. So I had just started my job at Northwestern as an associate head coach. I had left Michigan as an assistant, went to Northwestern, and in that time, Karch called me at the end of that season after my first season at Northwestern. And typically, as Karch does, he wants to know who's been kind of killing it in your conference. And I was a person that he leaned on at that time. I had worked a lot with our youth national teams and junior national teams. 2016 was the head coach of our U18 national team. So I spent a lot of time in Anaheim just getting to know the national team staff. I was really proud to be part of it and wanted to do a great job and honor the process. So I tried to learn as much as I could. And so I knew Karch, but not that well. So he called, and I thought it was just to chat through like who's playing well in the Big Ten and, who are the good key players. And he still does that with a lot of coaches. But instead he wanted to chat about his staff and the opportunity that he wanted to interview me and learn more about my goals and what I could maybe bring to the national team. And so I actually dropped my phone and it rolled under my desk. And I was, just so honored that he wanted to even talk about it. And we ended up having about a month long, just a bunch of different conversations into the beginning part of January of 2017. He ended up bringing on myself, and I, at that time, was working in college and the national team. And so I would similar to what I'm doing now. I would travel and be part of the national team in the summer months where the season is heavy, and then head back to college in the fall. I did that while I was in college for 2017 season and 2018 season. And then starting in the early 2019 season, as I was, we were kind of heading closer to Tokyo Olympics in 2020, what would have been 2020. I was all in on USA Volleyball in January of 2019. And like you said, I started working with, at that time, it was known as High Performance. And so our youth development. And then we really transformed that model into the National Team Development Program, and was really honored to be part of that program too. So from 2019 until last January, I was the director of the National Team Development Program and TTG, and was working with our national team through the Tokyo Olympics, and then took on Michigan last winter.
Impressive path. I can only imagine that call and the phone hitting the floor. Yeah. That's pretty funny. So let's just go into a little bit of the high performance program, because I feel like that was a real significant part of learning and help and developing what is now the feeder program, more or less, into our Olympic team. And, you know, what made you so perfect for this position to do this work for the United States volleyball program?
Well, it's nice of you to say. I don't know if I was a perfect fit, but I was really passionate in, and this was an organization. Just what we're talking about is the high school pathway and then the college pathway, really leading up until what you have for the national teams. And what I found was there were some areas where it could use a little more synergy of just blending the transition points between high school to college and then college to national teams. And then really myself sitting in both camps with the national teams and then trying to impact the youth development. When I say youth, I mean mostly this high school age. The synergy between all those things was really important to me, and where I wanted to have as much impact as possible. So how we prepared our coaches that we brought in to hire was where I started in 2019. How am I going to help prepare them with systems, with collaborating with our national teams, now certainly being part of it, but part of my role was with men's volleyball and beach volleyball, which I at that time knew not little about, but I didn't know those coaches as well. I didn't know those systems as well. So I spent a good part of the beginning of my time in the youth development space of learning those cultures, learning those coaches, the national teams, I started with men's volleyball and talking with John Spra, men's national team coach, and his staff, going to as many games or practices as I could of men's volleyball. And that was great for my own coaching development, but certainly needed to understand those landscapes. And then beach as well was foreign to me. I grew up in Chicago. There's some beach volleyball players from Chicago, but I wasn't one of them. And so learning that culture, learning the pain points, the struggle, the glory, just all the things from beach was super important to me if I was going to try to do a good job representing them. And then, you know, as COVID hits, our departments in USA Volleyball really took a very close look at how we were doing all the things that we were doing, how we were identifying athletes, evaluating coaches, just how when we had programming, how we wanted those programs to look and feel for the athletes, and how to prepare them for what the next thing was that they were going to do. And then there's competition at that age too, that we have less control over of when those competition dates and styles are, but how could we prepare athletes and coaches for those that set them up for success and kept them wanting to come back? You know, Peter Vint is the chief of sport at USA Volleyball. He started in 2019, the fall of 2019 was his start with us. And then just asked a lot of really good questions of our group, that department that we had. And at that time was called High Performance. And part of it was those questions that I just asked. And they were really transformative questions because we didn't have great answers at the time. And so it made us take a really deep look of what we were doing. And I felt really responsible, and it empowered me to try to have some better answers. So we decided to change a ton. We didn't start with our name, but transforming a lot of our programming and specifically of how we identified athletes. It was important for us to change the name of our program to the National Team Development Program. Again, to try to create the synergy was a big part of that. A big place of departure was the system used to have tryouts all over the country. So if anyone's listening that played volleyball, is either currently in college or a little older, they may have tried out for one of those programs before. When we had a deep look, one thing we just didn't do well was try to normalize how we evaluated athletes in those. And was this the best way that we could evaluate athletes? And really the answer was no. And we needed to look at that. So some of the places we decided to look was, how can we tap into the people that are looking at high school athletes the most are college recruiters, and how could we tap into their knowledge, understand what they're seeing, use their eyes and ears out on the road, and they're doing their work. So that was a huge part of it for us. So we ended up creating a scouting network and leaning on certain coaches to help pass information along to us. If anyone's listening that's been part of a college staff, and Janice, you'll know from your experience, it's really tough to get 3 or 4 recruiters on a staff to have the same language around athletes. We see them different. So creating a common language is a huge part of any culture. And so creating the culture for the scouting network of the National Team Development Program and the language that we would use was a really big part of that. And understanding how we wanted to look at the performance of athletes versus the potential of athletes. That's really what it comes down to, those two components. And then how we determined how to talk through and where athletes might fall on any kind of scale. So we have that now. We have what we call the talent identification and development model for USA Volleyball in the NTDP into the national team. So that stemmed from the group of people that were doing that work at that time. And so that is now, we've collaborated with university athletes on the indoor side, with Volleyball Life on the beach side, to help us with the reporting and getting information from college coaches, which has been a massive help. And I feel like it can still get so much better. I now no longer am the director of the NTDP, but there's amazing people there doing that work. I still talk to them often and see how we can continue to make that process as good as it can be. And so that's a big part of that. If you can identify the right people, the best people to be part of the programs, and then how can you best develop them? You got to hire great coaches and then prepare those coaches to do their work.
It seems as though you took your knowledge, your experience, your time as a player, as a coach, even as a club player, your work in with the national team, all the assets that you saw out there, and figured out how to put that together to create sounds like a pretty nice process that maybe makes it a little bit easier and also maybe more impactful to your eventual national team and our representation out in the world with our athletes and our volleyball players.
Yeah. And I think when you're doing anything, I think you want to try to learn from all the aspects that you've had an opportunity to be around. So we really tried to do that as a collective group of the now NTDP staff, including the chief of sport there at USA Volleyball, of just what are other sports doing that's impactful or meaningful work in those spaces. They might be NGBs or national governing bodies here in the United States. And other ones, baseball has their pathway, and soccer has a pathway, and hockey has a pathway. So looking at a lot of those pieces helped too, of just this, we aren't just making this thing from scratch. We're trying to learn from other people who've done it better than volleyball has. And we have a huge country, and there's tons of athletes. There's Man, 450,000 girls playing this sport in this country. And how do you try to decide who's on the U19 national team, which is going to train with only 20? So,
Yeah.
trying to distill down is not an easy task, and we're going to get it wrong a lot of times. But how can we learn from those? Another piece of the NTDP that we shifted was we tried to train more often.
Okay.
We were right away at a quarter system, and now they've shifted even to trimester, where they at least try to get the athletes together 3 times a year for a training camp at any length. It could be 3 days to 5 days to a 10-day training block for a national team, but just trying to hit them a little bit more often. So it's not just once in the summer or twice a year. And I think that's been really fruitful, and the athletes are becoming more common. The systems are less uncommon to them, but they understand that.
Sure.
And so we're trying to assimilate that, and the synergy, you can definitely see that. We just ran an open program in February, and that was, you could see that athletes had come through USA Volleyball. This wasn't their first time, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that probably brings even more competitive and excellent work. There's not so much fear. There's not so many unknowns.
Sure.
They can just let it rip, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's way more fun when you're doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I know a little bit about you as a player. I was coaching at that time, and I don't want to go too far here yet, but when you were a player at the University of Illinois, as I was digging through some things, and I may come with a couple questions here shortly, but I have one more before we go there.
Okay.
So these training sites, is this all done in Anaheim for people that are out there? Like where?
Yeah, it's a mix.
Where do you host them?
To create the best synergy possible, we wanted to run as many things as we could through the Anaheim home of USA Volleyball national teams, indoor national teams. We wanted to run things through where they could kind of brush up against our Olympians. They could see our national team staff. That was really important to us. You want to be able to see what's next, even if they were just watching practice. Our beach teams, they train, their main office is in Torrance, California, but they're training over in Huntington. And so we'll bring the beach teams to the beaches in California. But now we know that's just in one site. So this year alone, indoor will go down to Orlando. They'll train. The boys have a training camp in Colorado Springs. The girls will have a training camp at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. So we've started to move around the country a little bit, but certainly national teams, if we can get those teams training, collegiate national team, U19, U21, those national teams, the more often that we can get them training in Anaheim or near our beaches and near Torrance, that's great for our national teams. The best of the best should see what they're trying to aspire to be someday. And so that's been a huge part of it too. And they've gotten to know some of our players on the women's national team, men's national team, beach national team. And that's a huge deal. It's a huge deal to have role models. And most of the year, these athletes are not playing in the United States, at least right now. Some of them will come home in the next year or two with the new league starting up, but they don't get to see them very often. And so it's a big deal for us to get those training environments kind of aligned a little bit more. And same with the coaches. We can support the coaches so much better if we're on site with them. And so that's been a huge deal too.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel as though that aspect of the program, getting it out there, coaches being accessible to some degree to folks, is such a great aspect of a Karch run program.
Yeah.
And it's super valuable, and everybody involved with that just helps us grow our sport and make it so special.
Yeah,
so
agreed.
I know people really care about that. I do have one question about, so the kids that are making their way to the sites to be a part of the programs, to go through the camps, is that something that this is financed on their own, or is there, not to go too deep into that, but if somebody's listening and they're going, okay, what does that mean to me?
So it's a good question. We have, so at the top, the highest teams, and let's say U19, that's a high school age group, that any national team, U19 national team, U21, if there's a competitive opportunity associated with that training camp, those are paid for by USA Volleyball. So all the trip. And that's not the case for some of our neighboring countries. And so we cover, USA Volleyball covers all of those costs. And if it's a training series, which is usually 3 days, sometimes 5-6 days, that opportunity the cost will come from the family or the athlete or the school if they are in college. So those are training series camps. Those are throughout the year. We do have, starting this year, the USA Volleyball has a lot of funds that have been set aside for any kind of financial aid for somebody. So actually, NTDP is working through a process of what that can look like for families that need that. And so that's a super nice adjustment, because what we don't want is to have a limiting factor for athletes or families that can't afford to be part of this process. So, so it's a little bit of both, actually, Janice.
It feels like now that USA is more connected across the country. I grew up in Nebraska in this little bitty town.
Yeah.
And, access or even knowledge, honestly, about that was few and far between. So it seems as though that is so much better and will help us build that program for the national team even better.
Yeah. And it helps us with especially identifying athletes. It's less about there's no payments. It helps to obviously to be part of a club, and there's payment and there's dues there, but that's part of development as well. But you don't have to pay to try out. There's no limiting factor in that. It's to be identified it doesn't cost families or athletes anything. And that we wanted that to be the case as well. We didn't want it to have a barrier for entry in that space as well.
Okay, I'm going to shift a little bit here.
Okay.
You are one of only 3 coaches that have been honored by the AVCA in the 30 under 30 award. You've won that 3 times. What did that mean to you at that time? I mean, you've really gone after a career in this sport to make an impact, it feels. What did that mean to you to receive that?
Yeah. I think awards are that when that first came out, it was the first year. And so my last 3 years, I think, of being under 30 were those 3 years. And so I think some of it was, just it fit right when they started with that award. And you have to be nominated. I think the nomination process meant more to me than actually receiving that. No doubt, probably the coaches that I worked with nominated me for that space, and that meant that I was doing a good job working for them. And that meant a lot at the time. I think I was working for Reed Sunahara at the University of Cincinnati, and then I think Mark Rosen at Michigan. And so that, to me, that told me I was on the right track, and honored for the work that I was doing. And just, it was less about receiving the award, but knowing that, it was acknowledgement that I'm doing things kind of the right way, or this is the right path to be heading down. Yeah. So it was super nice. I think it's a great thing that the AVCA has and does. And I think to invest in those young coaches and keep them in the game as that award continues is, I think that's where you get the most impact from, like, their careers, if we continue to invest in them and help them grow.
I'm going to go back a little bit into your playing days. I mentioned that earlier. Yeah. You played at the University of Illinois. Yeah. You played for somebody I thought was just a great guy, Don Harden. And you had, AVC honorable mention honors. You were a setter. Yep. Which I always find that setters make good coaches. You played in the national A2 team and also on the women's national team. And then after that experience, you went into coaching. What about those experiences early in your career? How significant were those for you as you found your way into a sport I'm assuming at that point that you truly love this game of volleyball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's just fun to walk down memory lane. So I always appreciate when I get to talk about anything that led me to the place I'm at now. And I think about the experience I have now and where maybe I want to take them. But when I think back to specifically my time at Illinois, and, I think like most girls or most young players that get earn a scholarship or play in college, the high school space, like you're one of you're kind of a top player or a captain or something in the high school space. That's not uncommon to anyone that gets certainly into Big Ten play. My time at Illinois was so great for me, and not easy necessarily, but so great because I played so many roles.
Okay.
I really love thinking back to it because I was a starter and I was a captain, but I also was a bench player. I was a serving specialist for part of a season. Would come in, and I wasn't a passer because I was just a setter, so I didn't pass a lot, and so I would hide in the serve receive, and my role was to serve, and I was a jump server, I had a nice serve, but I was just a lot of different roles. I was an injured player. My senior year got hurt, and trying to support the team from that role was unique and tough, really tough. But those roles, playing so many different roles, it really helps me now that I'm a coach, and trying to talk through athletes that are in any of those spaces. They're all challenging. Even the starter and the captain to the person who never plays. Every role comes with challenges. Every role comes with opportunity. And thinking back to that and how my coaches talked through those things with me, pushed me to think through ways that I can impact the team. Certainly my last year when I was injured and I was a starter and I was a captain, to then be injured and try to support the team from a different lens was huge, super tough. I know that's not, I didn't handle it great all the time, but certainly thinking back was a big catalyst for me in wanting to be a coach and support the team from the sideline. So that's probably the biggest takeaway I have, is just the intentionality behind the roles and trying to be great no matter what is asked of you.
Yeah. And that's such an important lesson when, there's 12 players, there's only 6 folks probably out on that floor. You're going to have a role, and you got to do it at your very best, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
That was good. So, okay, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into Illinois.
Okay.
Because I also read that you all in 2004 beat University of Southern California, who had been the national champion the year before, I believe. And we're on this crazy. Was that Chuck Irby, right? Chuck Irby was coaching
Mick
them,
Haley was coaching there.
Oh, Mick was coaching them. Sorry, Mick.
That's okay.
And they had something like a 54 win streak. And they came up against you guys. And in there, I found your name a couple of times mentioned in the article talking about that. And it was like, I pictured diving saves to keep the ball alive. Erin was a part of diving saves to keep the ball alive.
Oh, that's so
funny. Serving huge, big serves that made such a difference and a big impact on the team. And I got so much joy from hearing that or reading that about you. And I know when people bring stuff up, it's such a good feeling. It's such a, you're a young person at that time, and things you go through are so unique, and, probably not going to ever do that again.
Well, I appreciate you bringing up really these good memories. That so that was in September of 2004. It's a long time ago now, 20 years ago, which is crazy.
20 years, yeah.
So yeah, that's my senior year, beginning of my senior year, and we were ranked, I think, 9th in the country, and just building the program at University of Illinois to be a national program. And I think they had been and then fallen down a little bit. And then that was a few years in the making of building it up. And my class, the seniors that I graduated with were just really motivated to just make that as good as we can before we left. And so, yeah, USC was the team at that time. They were back-to-back champions, and I think it was, 52, 53, 54 game winning streak. So they had 2 undefeated seasons in a row and started that season undefeated. And so they came in, they had a really good team. I mean, just some of the girls on that team, everyone would know who they are, but they just had a really nice team. I love that we had the opportunity to play them. I love that Don scheduled them and then put them into this it was on home tournament. It was at the University of Illinois. They came in, we had this press conference. Actually, my coach reminded me that this happened, but we had a press conference ahead of that tournament. And the way the tournament worked was we were playing an opponent on Friday night, and so was USC. And then the winners of the Friday night matches would play on Saturday. So there wasn't guaranteed that we would play them. Some tournaments don't work like that. So going into the press conference ahead of the weekend, my coaches reminded me, like, Erin, okay, just remember, we might not play USC. We have to beat, and I forget who we played Friday night, but we have to win Friday night before we play them Saturday. So just, good prep for the young interviewee going into the press conference. And so I was like, okay. So the winners on Friday will play on Saturday. So we may not play them. So of course we get into the press conference and the reporter asks, are you excited to play USC this weekend? And like a good person, good athlete, I remember. And so I said, and I don't remember doing this. I was reminded, because I'm usually not this bold, but I said, we may not play USC because they have to beat so-and-so on Friday before they can play us. So, and I said something like that, and but I did it right, so it's just a really funny story that I was reminded of actually just in the last year. Our assistant Jen Flynn, who's the Ohio State head coach now, reminded me of that last August. We were on a podcast together, and she reminded me that was what I did. Oh, I did. Yeah,
I didn't see that. I read it.
But it was awesome. We had, at the time, I think that was 4,000 people at a match. 4,000 or 5,000 was a huge number. I mean, now we're crushing those, but at that time, that was a huge number. So we sold out Huff Hall in Illinois. It ended up being my last home match that I played at Illinois. I was injured the next week. And so that just shares a ton of really, really amazing memories for me and my team. I also was like I mentioned, I was a jump server, and I loved that because it was just a very aggressive part of my game. I think setting had some finesse, but that was an aggressive part. And I was serving for match point in the 5th set, and I think it was 14-8. So I knew I didn't have to get this ball in, but I could really go for it. And I missed the sideline by maybe a couple inches or a foot. And my coaches just were shaking their head like, of course she's going to go for it. And anyway, we won on the next side out, but it was a really fun match.
So, your person. All right, let's talk about your family a little bit. And I also read some things. It's Patrick and Carol are your parents. You've got 2 brothers, 2 sisters. One of those sisters played at Ohio State. And some of the coaches you guys have been a part of, it's just so amazing, right? And you had said they taught you how to reach for your dreams, okay, and always were your biggest fans. How did they instill that in you? I kind of feel like you were born with a little bit of this competitiveness in you, but you got two brothers and a sister that's playing big time Division I volleyball. And were you the middle child?
I'm the fourth of five.
You're the fourth. Okay. So you didn't have the whole trauma of being the middle child.
Somewhere in the middle, yeah, but not third.
Talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, that statement you made. And I think I heard something also that your father may have held a pretty prestigious position as a pilot.
I'm glad you asked about my family. I mean, they're just really important to me. I am one of five. I have two parents, Pat and Carol. My family was a rock for me growing up, and they still are. I mean, we're still really close. And growing up, so my dad played college football, and certainly a lot of the competitiveness comes from him. And then I think my mom brings this amount of, she wanted to instill in us, and she still talks about it, that you can just be anything you want to be. And just, I think they both really believed in the heart of the athlete beyond just the skills and the techniques and that really not even in athletics, but just in school. I really never felt like I was the smartest person in the room. I definitely wasn't. I have very, very smart siblings that we all have very different, I think, educational paths, but no doubt for me, my parents instilled in this, like, if I work hard and I study, I can get A's just like my brother can, even though he might be, it might be easier for him or one of them. And both my brothers are really smart, and my sisters too. Everyone was really good students. And so I always felt, for me personally, that my family was a big part of the grit that I had. And I just had this kind of grittiness to me as I was growing up, and something that if I could be as good as anyone else if I just try hard and I just give it my all. That's the best lesson I think I could have ever gotten as a young kid. And, I think getting, pushed around, or just like you do with siblings, you have some rivalry. And, when you're competitive within a group, we see it probably as coaches, or if there's anyone that's out there listening that's on a team, the cream rises to the top. And then you also, if you can push one another in any group that you're with, and I was just around my siblings a lot, getting pushed, and who's going to be the best at Ghost in the Graveyard that night, or just tag, or whatever you're playing in the street or in your yard. I think that helps you kind of form into what you might be as someone that has, a good work ethic. And, I love that my parents brought that into me, and they were big supporters then, and they're big supporters now. And I think they loved watching me play, but usually the things they brought out after a tournament or a match wasn't the qualities that, hey, you set well today. It was more, I love that you chased that ball down, or how hard you worked, or that, you tried hard. And so I think those characteristics, I found that they valued those. And then reflecting on it now, that's what, it mattered to me to put those out there and to showcase myself in that kind of way. And I think about that a lot, of just parenting and coaching and how it kind of all blends together. And I owe a lot to them and my siblings too, for teaching me a ton. And for my, just, even if I didn't get along with everybody all the time, that's real life. It's how teams are. And our family was certainly the first team I was ever part of.
Yeah. I did hear one other quick little thing here, is that I believe going home for holidays, you might have to make a room reservation for room 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah.
What's this about? That's so funny. That's funny.
So, my parents still live in the house that we grew up in. And so it's just them. And, they have a bedroom that they built, because they just, as they wanted to retire in the home, and they built on the first floor. And so on the second floor, there's 4 bedrooms, and they are usually sit empty. So they're just kind of there when families come, or, my sister's visiting them. And so their kids can stay in certain rooms. And so just to define the room, because they used to be, that was Shannon's room and that was Pat's room. But as we grew up, they changed, like where we, who got their own room was a big deal as someone went off to college. Well, Shannon's room didn't need to be Shannon's anymore. Pat could get that room. And so we couldn't name it after kids. We had to find a better way to name it because we were always fighting over, well, it's not Shannon's room. I was in there after her. And so we named them. Now on the second floor, there's 201, 202, 203, and 204. And so when I stayed there, I visited them over the holidays, and I stayed, and 201 has the bathroom attached to it. So my mom put me in 201 and I felt like a queen, because usually that goes to somebody who, has a little kid with them or something. So, so we do make reservations, and there's even a basement bedroom now that they've made because they have all these grandkids and people come to visit, and they love hosting our family. So yeah, checking in is a big deal. Where you get the room reserved, it matters.
So you have nieces and nephews, sounds like. Any of those have any of this volleyball or athletic piece going for them that we might see down the road?
My sister, who played at Ohio State, her oldest, Grace, is starting to play volleyball. And she is, I think, just in that stage where she's exploring a lot of different sports. She plays ice hockey too and some other things. And so she's exploring volleyball. My one brother has a daughter in college, and she is on a musical path. She's in a musical theater program at Arizona State. And so has played a ton of sports. She's super athletic, but really down this musical path. And then my older sister's kids are, one's off to college next year, and she has 3 boys, and none of them got into volleyball. They had some volleyball in Wisconsin where they lived, but they were into all the things, not volleyball though. And then my brother, Dan, his 3 little girls are just a little too young to jump into volleyball, but there's hope for them. We'll see. But they certainly have come to a lot of my games and watched volleyball, and all of them have volleyballs that they have in their house because I fled them with them. So TBD on if we'll have any volleyball players in the family, but Katie's oldest, they'll probably dabble in it a little bit as she played the sport, but I think everyone's really just trying to see what their kids are interested in. So far, no volleyball players yet.
Good parenting for sure.
Yeah.
You said Katie's daughter, is also into ice hockey. Now, you got to be pretty aggressive and pretty tough.
Sure.
to go into ice hockey.
That's a sport I never played, but
right. Yeah, how fun is that?
2 of her kids are pretty into that, in ice hockey. One, her little boy, and then my niece Grace. So we'll see. My brother-in-law was playing ice hockey, and my sister Shannon, her son Ryan, is into ice hockey, and it's a really fun sport to go watch, though. I'm glad they're into that because none of my siblings played ice hockey. And so, but it's fun to go support them or watch on their streams.
Yeah. Awesome. So a couple of things about you. Some folks have described you as the eternal optimist. How did you become the eternal optimist? Where does this come into play for you and develop for you?
I think for me, optimism is I think there's a choice there. And I think where I want to be, I guess, as a person is really thinking that things can always improve or get better, or I can learn how to do something that I haven't, or I can work a little bit. I can kind of roll my sleeves up, for example, and just try to get better at something. So when there's something negative in my life, I want to try to get it better. So there's a little bit of that I think that could be looked at as optimism, but it could also be just looked at as like a way I want to tackle the world.
Strategy.
Yeah. And it could be strategy, and it just could be, I'm going to frame this in a different way where I'm going to choose not to get me down, but how can I use this to either fuel me or it may be just this happened and this was kind of not great and I don't like it, but how can I make it better next time this comes across my plate or my desk or what happened? But certainly there's tragic things or awful things that happen that, are harder to spin or frame in another way. But in general, I think I like to look at the world as a way that I can try to tackle things and make them better. But kind of like your podcast name, Leave It Better, and just try to
Leave it better.
Move forward in life that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I have a little bit of that as well. I think I want to learn. I want to learn something. Why did that happen? And then I have to move in a positive way because that's where I want to see life. So that I can change and I can make things better. There we go. Leave it better again.
Yeah. Exactly.
Here's another thing that came up regarding you is that one of Erin's strengths is that she always, I want to make sure I say that, is understanding the why behind the things that you are either learning, doing, experiencing.
I guess I'll go back to when I was a player. I started talking about this a little bit, but I hurt my knee and I was out for a season. And this is probably super relatable because this happens. This happened to one of our Michigan girls this year, and it's going to happen to some people in their playing careers, or just where your plan is one thing and it gets shifted. And so I got injured, sidelined, and it wasn't super easy the first few weeks, but I really had this choice. I could kind of totally isolate myself from the team. It didn't feel like a choice, but it ended up being a decision I needed to make of like, do you isolate yourself or do you lean in and try to figure out how can I help at the time I was a freshman setter playing, and what could I do in this situation? And I guess I'm not sure if it's optimism, but it was a choice that you make to just try to lean into this thing and decide to do something good with the kind of bummer situation you've been put into. And I'm really, really glad that I had people around me that pushed me to make that situation, the stinky one, better. And I want to try to help young athletes through those kind of things when this is not the role that you want to play, or you're in an injury. Okay, now what? And instead of just sitting with it. And then there's really way smarter people than me that help with that, and our counselors and but I think as coaches, you fall into those where you're always around the athletes. And so I think that's something I lean on a lot in my career now, of how can we, if you're presented with a choice, how can we just get people to make the choice that has the greatest impact of people around them? I think another thing was when I was, this was in my coaching career, I talked about how I was coaching at Northwestern in USA, and I was, at that time, Northwestern, it was really hard for them to have me beating in my foot in both camps. And so I made a choice to be all in on USA and leave Northwestern behind at that time in 2019 or late in 2018. And I wanted to be there for a really long time. It was a really hard decision, but it was best for USA that I stepped into that full time. And then I decided, okay, how can I impact the NTDP as it is? What does that look like? And so kind of, again, when you're faced with a fork, it's not as much of the thing you leave behind, but what are you stepping into? And I think that's where it's probably seen as an optimist a little bit, of just like, I want to step into and just go all in on the choice that I make. So far, that's leading me down a path of worthy pursuits and things that I find to be easy to give my heart and soul to.
Mm-hmm. It also looks like you're having a lot of fun.
Yeah,
doing this
that
as
also,
well. As hard as it is, to do that. As hard as it is.
Yeah.
We talked just a little bit about the Olympic team and the delay because of the pandemic and the kinds of things that this afforded you to do with that team. And again, I'm seeing this as, you can look at it and it's like, oh, we got to wait another year. This is a long time. What kinds of things, and how did you come about doing those things, if you did some things during the pandemic that did help you get to that gold medal, get to the podium at the top level, and make it through all the challenges and the situations that come about. And even for you guys during that tournament, you bumped into some things. So can you talk about that a little bit?
You know what? As awful as the time with COVID and lockdowns was, for the programs I was part of with USA Volleyball, I mean, I already talked about how the shift happened with NTDP, and that doesn't happen if we don't really have a year where we had to step back. And with the pause and the extra year of preparation for the Tokyo Olympic Games, to be honest, I'm not sure if we win that games without that extra time with our team and the culture. And we certainly had the components. We had the athletes, and those athletes I wouldn't put anything against them. We certainly could have won if that games was held in 2020. But that year, we were able to really put some process in place. I think as a coach, I think some of the most impactful things that came from that was we brought in a consultant, Sue Enquist, to help us work with our culture. And she's amazing for anyone knows her. But she was really keen on looking at the process of how we collaborated with the coaching staff, the athletes. How did we create a more transformative environment and maybe less transactional and less, we wanted to make sure that the athletes wanted to make sure that they knew they were part of this process. And by process, I mean, that's selection of the team. We have this enormous heavy task of you have about 30 athletes on a team in the women's national team, and you need to select 12 for the Olympic Games. And we're in that process ahead of Paris right now. But just understanding that process, understanding the elements that the athletes need to be able to have some of the say of that, and really collaborating with the group. Making sure that the program that is their program, it actually was in the hands of the athletes in a lot of different ways. For example, in that time, Feluca Arconradamo had a baby. So that was unique, and let her be a mother, and what that process was to have her come back and get back to health and have the ramp up. I think that afforded her that extra time to do that and get healthy. Which we want women to get married and have babies and just anything that they want in their life. I think that's part of the national team program. Culture is certainly not easy what she went through, but that was, undoubtedly a big part of she played a huge role on the court. And then also as a leader and an experienced player for our team as a third-time medalist in the Olympic Games, having her on that roster was certainly really impactful. Our leadership from that, Jordan Larson was our captain at that time, and it allowed her to have a journey of growth as well as a leader. And I think she did an amazing job. But there was so many areas where we really had to break things down as a team culturally and look at that between team, staff, and then certainly separately as well. And was really proud to be part of that journey. It wasn't easy. I think anything that is worthy of a pursuit of mastery is certainly not easy. But I think our team took advantage for sure of that time we were delayed.
Yeah, that definitely is not easy, because you're dealing with some situations that are there, and a lot of times if things are going really well, things just smooth right over it. But if something should happen, it gets a little rough and gets a little bumpy as you come across that. Speaking of Jordan Larson, she's from Hooper, Nebraska, which is not very far from where I'm born and raised in Randolph, Nebraska. The ending of that game, when that set went to Jordan Larson and she put it down, I think I literally just started to cry.
Yeah, me too.
Because I was, so happy for everybody, but just for Jordan. And because I do think I was able to see and you guys maybe allowed for us to see her growth and her leadership and the building of your team into this amazing team that was just deeper, maybe meshed together, maybe a little tighter than most. For you, with the Olympic gold medal, what is either a situation that you remember just being in that moment that is still sticking with you, and it's just so bright and it's in your heart and it's in your soul?
Yeah, so that last play, for those that don't know, we beat Brazil in 3 sets, and Brazil had a timeout up until close to the match point, and that ball was always going to go to Jordan. Jordan Poulter was setting that match, and we set the play up so that we could give Jordan some space and some daylight to swing at, and just happened to have a great pass, and just, I think it was set up in such a way that it meant a lot to, I think Poulter was setting to give that last chance to Jordan. And she just carried our team, I think, just as a leader, which was awesome. Yeah. And I think that probably the most emotional moment for me was actually when we won the semifinal, because you had a chance to medal. You knew you were getting a medal for this team who had worked a lot. 5 years, most Olympic game quads are 4, and we had 5, and just went through a ton, and with the staff too. I think I was the most emotional after that match, beating Serbia in the semifinal, and it was a really, really good team, and they had our number a lot in that quad. We played them really well, had a really good scouting report, and knowing that this team earned either a silver or gold, and then you could just lay it out against Brazil, who we faced a lot last quad. We faced them a lot. We have a lot of respect for their program, and that was just, was icing on the cake to be able to take that and win gold. And it was the first for the women's program. There was a lot of special pieces to that. We had a really cool connection with the 1980 Olympic team, who didn't actually get to go compete at the Olympics because of the boycott, but they were special in sending messages to our team. And we had a lot of behind the scenes, just cute connection with that group of women. For them, they never had the opportunity to do what this team had an opportunity to do. So it meant a lot, I think, to our group to hear from those who had kind of carved the path to get them there. And I think it was just way bigger than our team for the women's program to have their first gold. And they had so much success in other Olympic games with bronze and silver, but to get the first gold was really, really unique and special, and something now we're striving to get a second one, and knowing how hard that pursuit is it's heavy on our team, but it's really exciting, I think, heading into this Paris Olympic Games this year.
I know it was beautiful to watch, and it's such a pride point for all folks that love this game in the United States. I remember something that was written, and maybe it goes with that Olympic final points of this, and just, you talked about playing Serbia, and it was the practicing of ugly plays, or the things to come out of ugly plays. Is this something, I read this in Karch's book, which I did buy immediately.
Yeah, good.
Because I wanted to get the inside of this guy's mind that you get to be around and be in witness and touch the things he's a part of. And I thought that was so good, and may have helped you all during that time, because I think there were some injuries and some things that happened. They're like, what?
You're not going to make it through that type of tournaments. And we're preparing for the Paris Games this way. You're not going to make it through without some kind of adversity. And we faced down a couple pretty gnarly things in Tokyo. 3 that come top of mind. One is we got our butts kicked by Russia. So we lose to Russia, and 3, they smoke us. We didn't get smoked very often, but they smoked us. And then we had a day off. So that games, you had game off. And so we had a day off, and then we had to get ready and prepare for Italy. And so putting that loss to bed as soon as possible was huge. That was probably one of the first things we had to kind of manage. And then Jordan Thompson got injured. She was our starting out opposite. And then Annie Drews came in for her, and Jordan Poulter was injured. And we had Mike Hancock come in, and then Jordan Poulter was able to return back to the court. So you had two key starters get injured, one that was out for the rest of the tournament. So there was a couple components to that. And I can't remember exactly what Karch referenced in the book, but as far as ugly plays go, one thing that our team worked really hard on was if we have a play, let's say it's just an ugly rally, and he has one that he likes to show, like just didn't go great. It was pretty sloppy. And the team held their huddle for like 12 seconds, and the ref had to blow the whistle to get them out of the huddle. But it was a reset. And in that example, that video example, I can remember it super clearly because we've showed it to our team since then. But our libero, Justine Wangarante, who brings a wonderful sense of calm. She has a great way to move through tough moments. You could see her talking to the team, and I went out in the huddle, so I don't know what she said, but there was certainly a collective breath that was taken, and we were able to move on to the next point. And that happens 100 times in a match, where you have the opportunity to not let one point affect the next point. And so our team did that, and they didn't let one match affect the next match. One injury affect how we're going to play and react to that. So that's certainly some work that we do either with our mental performance coach, Katie Stanfill, or with culture with Sue Enquist, or just our team in general and the work that they put in. That matters. That matters when you're the margins are thin and you're trying to be the best in the world. Right. How you react to moments like that is a big deal.
This group of athletes and your ability to really lead them, and these guys are experienced players. They've been around, had a lot of things happen in their life. And when you bump it up and you're now in that Olympic international competition, that transition for them, some of them, like Jordan Larson, had been there for a very, very long time. So but some of them had not. What was that like for you as coaches and, the receptiveness of the players? Was this something that was challenging to get them to be a part of, to think of, or was this fairly easy to get them to implement and see the value of what you were asking them to become?
Yeah, I think when you're working with elite athletes, I would say athletes because that's the profession I'm in, but really when you're trying to work with someone who's trying to be a master of their craft, to me, the ones that I've been around that are the greatest in that, they want to get better. I think if you can talk through, and earlier you had asked of understanding a why, that's a big part of that. If I came in with a way to, improve on our slide attack, or, I work with our offense of something that I hadn't thought of. If I didn't have a why or maybe a pathway to get there, I think you'd be kind of hitting a little bit of a wall with either athletes, or the buy-in it takes a little more. So I think understanding what it's going to take, the why behind it, is a big part of presenting those things to either athletes or to our coaching staff of, hey, we can get better at this space and it's going to help us in this other space. Here's how we're going to do it. But having a pretty clear path and frame of mind is a big part of that. And you're a little bit of a salesman in that space too, you have to know what your car is worth before you try to sell it. So I think that's part of that, but just having a little belief and understanding of what is the change that you're asking to make and how will it impact inevitably the team and our performance outcomes.
I want to flip this just a hair. You are the head coach at the University of Michigan. You got your dual roles. And I had an opportunity to speak to one of your folks on your staff and learn a few things about the connectedness of all of you guys in some way through time. You know, you were able to build that, I believe, from scratch up. What was some of your strategies behind that as you were bringing people in? What were you looking for, and what did you get?
Yeah. So when you take over a program like Michigan, certainly a year ago was able to bring in, our core staff is 6 people, myself and 5 others. We have an amazing support staff, including people who don't report directly to me, but that's our strength and conditioning, nutrition, mental performance, athletic training. So these are amazing people that we just get to be around, and they impact our program in a huge, huge way. And they were already here. And so there wasn't changeover in that. And that was really important because you bring in so many new people that to have support in areas, in key areas to our development and growth that are consistent with, even if there's a change in coach, and the culture changes certainly when there's a new coach. But I was able to go and hire 5 people. And so those roles on our staff are 3 assistants, a director of operations, and a performance analyst. So those roles were left to me to decide how I wanted to allocate the space and who does what. Other programs may have their apps and their performance analysts are the same person. For me, they are different skill sets, and I was looking for different skill sets in that. Last year, 2023, the 3rd assistant could be a full-time employee. They used to be more volunteer, but here we have them be a full-time employee. So I was able to have 3. So that was cool to think about, but that happened in the summer. So that wasn't something that happened right away. And then I just looking at trying to get the best candidates possible. I brought in, instead of assistants, I have 2 associate head coaches and an assistant coach. So those are my 3 assistants, if you will, but promoted right from the start 2 people. Knowing that I would also have time where I'm in Ann Arbor and time when I'm with the national team, these for the first 2 years of my job. I wanted to make sure to hire people who have been head coaches, people who have led programs, because there would inevitably be a time where I may not have been exactly where I needed to be to make the tough decision or the decision in that moment. So wanted to hire people that have had those experiences. And also, as a first-time head coach, I've led the NTDP and I've directed and been a leader in other spaces. But I wanted to hire people who could also, give me advice and make sure I'm also getting better in spaces that are new territory for me. So actually, 4 of the 5 people that I hired have been head coaches in college. Which is great for me, again, to have to lean on people that, we're not just green right out of the gate. We have experience on the staff. And so that's really exciting. So the way I built that out was Coley Polakowski is our director of operations. She also is our team leader or team manager for our national team. So she has a really similar role for our national team, just helping coordinate a lot of logistics and operations and a lot of things that could be thought of behind the scenes, but just help us run really effectively. And when you have your hands in a lot of things with student athletes, it's so important to have someone that kind of helps lead those organizational efforts. And she does incredible at that. That's a new role for her. And in college athletics, and she's doing a great job. With my 2 associate head coaches, Dan Polakowski and Benavia Jenkins. Dan is our offensive coordinator. He also leads our recruiting efforts and helps manage and organize those, which is a massive effort. We want our whole staff involved in recruiting, and that's just not one person, but we do need a main point of contact to help organize us in that fashion. Benavia will be our defensive coordinator. She's someone that has played middle blockers. She played at Florida. She played professionally for many years after college. Also has such a great and vast experience in lots of aspects. She recently was the head coach at East Tennessee, was the conference coach of the year in the SoCon, and just as a tremendous leader and a passionate person. Nick Clark was the last add of the coaching staff, and he adds so much value in our defense and our libero work with our positional spot. He was a men's coach and women's coach at Harvard most recently before we were able to snag him away. And someone that's native to Michigan, understands also the values of this school and the roots and the tradition and the history here. And someone I've known for a really long time, of just a solid person that I know is going to continue the values that we want. Our performance analyst, Matt Adams, is someone that is probably the most curious person I've been around. And it's really helpful for me. And he pushes the envelope in a space that is continuously changing. How we analyze sports, how we collect the data is just one part of that. But then what do we do with it? How do we visualize it so that our student athletes can understand the data? How do we monitor we have load tracking devices, but how do we couple that with how we look at training? How do we use artificial intelligence and that growth in that world to be more effective in our day-to-day work? So Matt and I, we work really well together because he asks good questions and trying to solve the answers to those. So that staff, I think, I tell this to a lot of people. If I wanted to hire people that just followed me around like lemmings, I wouldn't have hired this staff. I would have hired lemmings, I guess. But I wanted a staff that pushes each other, that pushes me, that can break down barriers in each of our lanes. Certainly, we're going to disagree on some stuff, and that's normal and good. And that's for me to help lead us through. But I really love the fact that we have an experienced group. We have a lot of work to do to get Michigan to where I know Michigan can be. And it's going to take people like that to push out those barriers versus someone that's just following me around. We're not going to get it done if that's the case. So we have good people. That's number one on my list. And we have people that are going to work hard and be really excellent in their roles that we're asking them to do.
All right. With the Michigan team, there's a program, I think we call it the Individual Development Plans, the IDP. Is this something you put together? Is this something, I know you presented to the Michigan Coaches Association and shared this knowledge with them. And I'm hearing just wonderful things about what this does. Once you talk about it, do people have access to being able to see what it is that you're doing with this program? Or is this something you're kind of keeping to the Michigan Coaches Association?
Yeah. So I don't think the concept, it's just an individual development planning. It's just it's a way to be really intentional about how we want to develop athletes and our student athletes in a holistic manner. I think is something that was really passionate to the work we were doing. I was doing when I was with the national team and NTDP, but specifically looking at like Karch has his hands in and Tama, who are full-time USA right now. They're working on just what are we trying to get better at when the national team athletes are overseas. And with our program at Michigan, I really carried that school of thought into this program. So it's not anything that I created on my own. It's just the piece that you have to know what you want to get better at, what areas, what categories. For us, it might be, they may be working on something with our mental performance coach. And so they may meet with a coach to talk about that, but the mental performance, Brandy at Michigan, she may be working with them on their breathing or whichever method or methodology that they're trying to get better at. So knowing who supports them, what is their goal in that area, and then also if it's on the court, if it's something they're doing with academics, if there's something they're doing with their physical work that they're doing in the strength and conditioning room, that might be our strength and conditioning coach. Maybe it's something with nutrition, but just trying to boil down what are the key areas, this might be for any program. What are the key areas you're trying to develop? And then how can you systematize that where you have some either benchmarks or goals that someone might try to hit in any given day or week? And then this spring and this winter and spring, Dan and Manavia are really leading that as far as having checkpoints with coaching staff. They'll have athletes maybe they have to meet with their position coach weekly to watch some video. That might be part of that. And they're watching video on their focus point. So it's just a way to organize development. And so that's the IDP part of it, the individual development plan. There's a lot of sports that I think have done that and done that really well. But really it's organizing the development. We have 10 in the gym right now, 10 athletes, so that they know here are the things they're trying to go and get better at. And what are you already doing well is part of that too. So I think where one of the strengths I have, I think that I've tried to bring into Michigan is just trying to organize things in a little bit clearer way. So it makes it easy for everyone to have their hands in. And so I think that's part of this plan is making sure when you have a lot of things you want to work on, but how can you really distill those down? Like really specific example, when we first implemented this last winter with our Michigan team was we looked at like the whole body pillar. So whether it's nutrition, strength and conditioning, recovery, sleep, trying to get a really specific goal. One girl wanted to just make sure her water intake was at a certain ounces per day. And she could track that. And so she was trying to do that 5 days a week of the days of the week, the weekdays. And she could just track that in her planner. So that was a really specific goal that she had and just trying to notch off some benchmarks in that. So how can we start really small and be really intentional about what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I really love that because it keeps it right there. It's the good, it's the improvement, and you bring it back around, and you're looking at it as a player. The coaches are looking at it, and you're having these great conversations that really keep it real and moving the program forward. One of the things I also found out about you that nobody outworks Erin.
Except for maybe Cart.
The fabric, you are so immersed in the sport. Why is this so important to you? What is it about this that drives you? Why is it important to you?
Good question, Janice. I think it was how I was raised is just to work as hard as I can. There's certain times where, of course, like as I'm growing, you learn to take a pause or, take some time to yourself or ways that you can relax. But I feel like I'm part of two really worthy pursuits. I'm working to be as good as I can for Michigan, and we're trying to do as good as we can in the Olympic Games. And when I put myself in those roles, I feel it's a part of my duty to give everything I can to them. And if you expect that too, I want that for my athletes in both camps, my staff, but just trying to pour myself into those two jobs it feels like the right thing to do, honestly. And it's the only way I really know how to do that. I don't know how to necessarily just take it easy or just kind of not try to get better, I guess, but trying to pour myself into those it just feels the right path.
It's your makeup, I think.
Yeah.
So when you go to bed at night, do you just lay your head down and you fall asleep? Or are you still processing?
Yeah, sometimes. Just depends. I think like anyone, sometimes you got to try to turn your brain off. But yeah, different strategies for that. But I think generally I feel like I do a pretty good job of just trying to like have some space where I do try to turn those things off, because then I can turn them back on. But every once in a while, something will keep you up. It's normal. I think that's
okay.
human.
All right. So we're turning this off, and you're Irish Catholic, right? And there's some music in your life.
Yeah.
And a couple folks, I pulled this up last night, and as I was preparing for you, I was listening to Brett Denning.
Oh, okay. Brett Dennen.
Okay, I must have spelled it wrong here. And I was loving that music. I'm like, okay, all right, I'm going to listen to more of this. It was very fun. And then I think there's, and I'm probably going to butcher this too, Gardner Brothers, the Riverside dancers, the tap dancing group.
Yeah, a little tap.
So you brought me in to discover a little bit of this Irish music phase. So who is your famous or your special group that you like to listen to?
Yeah. So, my family, my parents are both 100% Irish, and, growing up, we would listen to a lot of Irish music, and my grandma always listened to Irish music. And actually on the way into work today, I was listening to the High Kings, which is an Irish band.
Okay. I'm going to look that up.
They have a lot of ballads and some like upbeats. But I really like them. I'm sure, I think they may even come through Ann Arbor this spring. So I'll have to take my staff.
Oh gosh. Do they know you're there and that this is important?
Yeah, exactly. And especially, as it gets around St. Patrick's Day, I usually try to infect anyone around me with a little bit of Irish folk music. So there's like rock music, just like any genre. There's like rock and there's folk and there's like everywhere in between. I like them all. So just kind of nostalgic for me, and my family all gets really into Irish music. So I think it's something, no matter what our individual tastes are, I think we all really like when we can listen to Irish music. But yeah, the High Kings are good. Gaelic Storm is good. Flogging Molly is more on the rock side. That's, if you're really looking to have like a nice, fun time, Flogging Molly is there. But I would listen to Irish music before I played. Usually something a little bit more relaxing. I never needed to like be amped up to play a match, but that would relax me and just kind of calm me down and get me in a good mindset to play. So that was kind of my fun fact of match prep.
So if I'm driving and I see Erin and she's driving, I look over. Is that like,
it might be
you rocking in that car or what's happening?
Yeah, a lot of times. Yeah. I'm not a great singer, but I'll sing along to a song. Yeah.
You're real good in the car. It sounds great.
I'm a car karaoke.
All right. I have only just a couple more things I'd like to ask you. The Pro League is starting. A couple Pro Leagues are coming to the U.S.
Yeah.
I'm just having a blast turning these matches on, watching these women compete. I mean, they are competing and they're so smart, and it's just like, and they're so skilled and they're so athletic. It's like, what an amazing thing. So let's talk about that a little bit. And I hear you actually have a phone connection maybe, and you can have some conversations with some of these folks out there as a representative of the USA or whatever that might be. Just Erin as a person is significant to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. I mean, what a time for women's volleyball. We have Athletes Unlimited that has been now going on 3 years, and they've moved now to the fall. The Professional Volleyball Federation, PVF, just started. And so they're in their first inaugural season as we're recording. And then League One starting up next year in the spring. So, we have a lot of people ask, which one's your favorite, or who do you think is going to succeed? And I'm rooting for all of them. And I'm rooting for a sustainable model. All three have really different business models, really different models of just growth, their plan for growth, their plan for sustainability. And I am not an amazing business person, so I am just literally just rooting for all three. There are opportunities for athletes. We, as USA Volleyball, we've partnered with all three. And I think there just is a hope that we can have a great league here in the United States. Historically, there's been some attempts. There was an attempt a lot. Like the last one I remember was when I was in high school, and there was a league that just began and just didn't sustain. And so for whatever reason, but I think we have a great women's volleyball is just booming. Attendance and interest and viewership on TV. Michigan, Ohio State volleyball this fall was our first match on Fox. It was just awesome. So the leagues are really exciting, I think, for the future of volleyball. And then, talking about how it impacts athletes graduating from college into getting preparedness for national team, also keeping them in the game longer without having to play, and just overseas away from their family. Our current national team athletes are just so many athletes that play, even not national team, just they play overseas. They miss weddings and they miss so much. And there's a lot of sacrifice there. And that can only be sustainable for so long. So I love that we have these leagues popping up. Again, different ways that they're being managed and done and financed. So I'm just interested. I'm a fan. I try to watch as much as I can. We're taking our Michigan team to the Grand Rapids Rise match in April. And I think that we have a Michigan alum playing for the Orlando team right now, and she's having a blast. We have some of our national team athletes. Morgan Hens is playing for Atlanta, and she had a big hand in helping recruit athletes to the league. And so I'm rooting for her and all the efforts that she put in. And so it's been fun. It's been really fun. And I'm excited to see, everything's better when you have it year 2. And so I'm excited for them to get into that and League One to start up in November, I think, starting with their training.
Yeah, it is exciting. That's for sure. For a volleyball junkie, and you can't capture it as perfect watching it on TV. But it seems as though the atmospheres and the situations they are building around those matches and the people there are having a blast. So I think that will be something that will definitely continue on to build and take advantage of the popularity of everything at this point.
For sure.
All right, last thing.
Yes.
Promise. Did I say that last time?
Nope, you're good.
Do you have any quotes you live by?
A lot. I think there's a lot, but there's one that it took me a while to really understand, but I think about it a lot. It's actually John Wooden, but my coach said this to me, Don Harden, in college, but it was be quick, but don't hurry. That was, I think about that. It was, for me, when I was a player, I was like hurrying around all the time. I think, I was trying to run after balls, or I was trying to get to practice the fastest, or just whatever I was trying to do. But I was just busy. And what that quote means to me now, or eventually meant to me, was you want to move through things quickly and efficiently, but not in a busy mess, And so I think about that with my players and how we move, how we can move from one thing to the next thing, even if it's just moving on the court. But it really is about efficiencies. And it's about maybe working smarter and not always working harder. Just especially tackling as much as I have on my plate. It's how can I be quick, but not hurry through things that matter. So, there can be very, very matter-of-factly on the court when you're trying to coach someone of, just moving on a block or reading the game better, where you don't have to hurry and you can just move through it quicker. And then I think through just my day-to-day of how can I try to be as present as possible, but try to still move through things quickly and efficiently, but not hurry through my day, or not take some time to meet with an athlete or meet with you all, or, what those things, how they matter. So that one sticks through, and I think it's helped me with a lot of different lessons in my life, but I never understood it when my coach first said it to me in high school. I think he said it to me watching me in high school and then into college. And I was like, aren't they the same thing? But it feels different. And so I think about that quote a lot.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I see it's able to kind of soak in to you when you do things like that.
Yeah.
You get to feel it a little bit deeper, maybe.
Yeah, a little more meaningful.
Yeah. I have had a blast getting to know you better. I will be cheering you on in both of your endeavors here.
Thank you.
With the national team and University of Michigan, Go Blue. And so appreciate you being on. This program is really for the Side Out Foundation Dig Pink community.
Cool.
We're offering things where they might be able to learn something, little tidbits from you, special things that they can take into their own life to make them better. And we sure do appreciate this time, because I know you're a very busy woman. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been fun.
Thank you for listening. Please share your feedback with us at side-out.org.